Gallup latest poll on US credibility showed that 20 years since the launch of Operation Iraqi Freedom and the liberation of Iraq, Iraqis and the residents of 12 other Muslim nations do not view the US as serious about the region and an obstacle in the region's political future. At the start of the 21st century, the US stood in a unique position. With communism defeated a decade earlier, the US had no peer competitor. US thinkers were planning how they would turn the 21st century into the American century. The neocons who came to dominate the US administration saw regime change as the best use of US power by removing unfavorable regimes, and very quickly Iraq came to be the first piece on the chessboard. Iraq, much like Afghanistan, turned into a mitigated disaster, but torture, Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib, and the war on terror came to define the US, and very quickly many across the world came to see the US as the problem rather than the solution. US credibility is not just in decline around the Muslim world, but confidence in democracy and politicians within the US has also hit rock bottom, and many see the system as not working for them. The US invaded Iraq in order to bring democracy to the region and propel US power into the 21st century. But what transpired is the decline of the US and the world crying out for a new global order and an alternative global system. The Gallup poll is just the latest confirmation of this. Pakistan's National Security Committee announced it would launch an all-out comprehensive operation with the support of the entire nation and the government against terrorism that will occur at all levels of society and incorporate all elements of state power. The government says it has formed a committee to make more detailed recommendations about the operation's next step within the next 2 weeks, and it added that the prior negotiations with militant group Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan (TTP) had been a mistake, an implicit rebuke of the opposition leader, former Prime Minister Imran Khan. The government may very well be using the operation to delay the vote in upcoming provincial elections in Punjab, which the Supreme Court recently said must go ahead on the 14th of May, despite the government's attempt to delay the poll. Since operations first began in 2004, despite the immediate success, which usually leads to massive displacement and high level of civilian deaths, in the long run, they have never succeeded. Newly released IMF data has revealed how much of the national budgets are spent on debt repayments by IMF customers, the figures revealing striking amounts despite decades of IMF borrowing. The IMF has for long marketed as a responsible global institution that helps developing nations restructure their economies through loans and policy prescriptions. Over the decades, many of the world's poorest nations have borrowed money from the IMF for economic development, but the success rate of the IMF would see it fired if it were in the commercial sector. The IMF has only indebted nations around the world and doesn't have a single example of a nation that borrowed IMF money and succeeded in developing. Muslim nations from Pakistan to Egypt, Tunisia to Bangladesh have all borrowed IMF money, and all are now drowning in debt repayments. The IMF news release shows that Pakistan is spending 52% of its budget on loan repayments. Egypt spends 49%, with Nigeria spending 26% of its budget, and Bangladesh 20% of its budget. With such large amounts of the national budget going on debt repayments and not health, education, development and industry, it's not surprising the Muslim world remains where it is. Many third world rulers, as well as Muslim rulers, have no long-term plan for economic development and are more than happy to take IMF loans, with the IMF more than willing to lend to fill the short-term financing gaps. All agree that repayment of the loans should be left to the future generations. The Afghanistan Ministry of Mines and Petroleum has announced that a Chinese company has expressed its interest in investing $10 billion in Afghanistan's lithium deposits. The acting Prime Minister for Mine and Petroleum, Shahabuddin Delawar, met with the Chinese company representatives in Kabul and said the investment would create 120,000 direct and 1 million indirect jobs in the country. The Chinese company also offered to repair the Salang Pass within 7 months and carve another tunnel, according to the Ministry of Mines and Petroleum statement. According to several media reports, Chinese companies have long aspired to access Afghanistan's extensive and rich lithium deposits, estimated to be worth more than $1 trillion. Lithium is critical for semiconductors, a tech the US and China are in major competition over.